Hi, welcome to Thaddaus Dawson Speaks, Liberation through Valuation, where soul meets soil. Today is the first day of Black History Month, and we are honored to have a history maker in the making in Kemo A'akhutera. That's Kemo, not chemo. Kemo A'akhutera. He's a container home builder out of Dayton, Ohio, that I've had the pleasure of knowing for a couple of years now. And I can't say that I am not very proud of this young man and the work that he is doing in affordable housing in the sphere. He's very energetic, enthusiastic, and he talks 10 times more than I do. So I am going to let him run with it, and we're going to talk about container homes, the challenges with container homes, the challenges with valuation, and his proof of concept, and how he's changing the landscape of affordable housing through his development of container homes. Welcome to the show, Kemo.
Much appreciated, Thad. That was a heck of a lead-in. Much appreciated. Glad to be here the first day of Black History Month.
Well, you are a history maker, so history is in the making. I've watched your growth and development over the last couple of years. We were introduced by none other than Miss Barbara out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and her company, and she was telling me I had to meet this fantastic young man, Miss Barbara Rayford. I'm sorry, I always get her last name a little bit confused because when I used to know her, she was Barb Carroll, and then she had a couple other last names that I like to tease her about. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. She's a major construction builder. And I can't believe, Kamo, I got you on the radio show podcast before I've been able to get Barbara and her son Daniel scheduled. But anyway, here we are. Tell us about your journey. Tell us about your company now as it exists, and how you got interested in developing and building container homes.
That's a mouthful. Okay, so this talking is on the way. All the talking you said I do, I'm gonna have to go ahead and jump into that with the answer to that question. So the way I got started into it, if we go all the way back to when I was a young lad, always recognized there was a lot of.
You was a young lad. You still ain't 30 years old. What are you talking about?
I just turned 40 last year, man.
Oh man, okay. You're wearing it well. You're wearing
it
well.
Don't crack. So, when I was young, under the age of 18, I was always, kind of looking at our neighborhoods, and I grew up in the hood, a lot of affordable housing kind of scenarios, but also a lot of blight, a lot of empty lots. And, I'd always ask my mom, why does it feel different here versus going to the suburbs? Like, why do our neighborhoods not flourish like you see other neighborhoods flourish, that's basically mostly populated by other groups? And nobody could really ever give me an answer. She couldn't give me an answer. Other people I asked. And so I always had this, this interest in understanding the real estate, that affects all of our lives. Like, we can't get away from real estate. As long as we have these physical bodies, we have to have somewhere to stay.
And I can jump in there and answer that question for you a little bit, because I've been writing a couple articles on that. That's called compounded external obsolescence. That's impacting the communities not being developed, and the effect has been compounded over years of disinvestment and some other things. But I wanted to answer that for you before you got too far down the road, and we can come back to that later.
No, that's good. I never had an actual term to it, so that's excellent. I just studied the impact of it, but I figured somebody had to quantify it and qualify it. So that's beautiful. And so that compounded external obsolescence, plaguing our communities was always something that I noticed that it seemed like everybody else either ignored or just didn't even pay any attention to. It's just like, this is what it is. And so turned 18, my older brother had told me about folks getting into real estate. Anybody who was wealthy, they were in real estate, and I thought he meant a real estate agent. And so I ended up seeing an infomercial with the two short guys. It was twin brothers. They was driving, Ferraris, had all the beautiful women. They was like, you want to be like us? You need to get into real estate. And I'm like, oh, this is what he meant. Not an agent. This is real estate investing. And so initially jumped into the game on that side of things. But again, I was never particularly focused on how could I make a bunch of money. It was, how do I take these no money down kind of strategies, these creative real estate investing strategies, and apply them to this community development need, to like this need I'm seeing in my community. And so I started out really looking at grabbing up some of these homes for pennies on the dollar, and then trying to figure out what kind of creative applications, uses that, I could employ in order to activate the space and make it an anchor institution for the community, whether it was just, a residence. This is before Airbnb and any of these things. It was like, could we do co-living? Could we make it, some type of recovery housing? I was just always trying to explore these ways to get these houses for dirt cheap, and then do something that was more than just a profit, seeking venture. And so I did that for 10 years. From 2009, I got in right after the market crashed. Everybody told me I was crazy. I was buying houses $5,000-$10,000 a pop, move-in ready. And again, people were like, "Oh man, these houses aren't worth anything in the hood, man. Why are you buying them?" And my basic argument was, we aren't in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. There are actually people still living in these neighborhoods. So at what point is a house not a house because of the price that you paid for it? I'm like, if somebody paid me to take it, it's still a house. So it doesn't matter what the cost was, what kind of condition is it in, is it move-in ready, and can we, get more than one so we can actually start to change the landscape. And so did that for 10 years. And then in about 2015, and then about smack dab in the middle of that effort, I started exploring new development, new building. And I was looking at the most efficient way to do it, most effective way, and everything was pointing to on-site being just extremely cost prohibitive. It was just a failing business model. Most developers lose money on their projects. If they break even, they kind of see that as a win. And so it was like, okay, well, let me find a better way to do this. And so I kept digging, and ran into offsite building. And as I explored deeper into that, I started looking at all the different approaches to building offsite. We looked at SIP, structurally insulated panels, cross-laminated timber, cold formed steel, dome homes. The 3D printing thing was starting to kind of come around then. But everything kept pointing to container-based housing being the most efficient and cost effective, considering that you're taking something that was already built and upcycling it for a better purpose. So it's inherently green, sustainable. I'm a tree hugging hippie all day, every day. So I really didn't want to start to create unnecessary waste to achieve this goal of new building. And so containers made the most sense, considering that there's 14 million containers floating around the world. That was as of like 2 years ago, and the number never ceases to
So tell me
increase.
this real quick. So are you recycling old containers and then converting them into housing?
Technically, all containers that we use are old, even if it only had one trip of freight in it. So we use what they call one trippers, where China makes 95% of the containers. They fill it with freight, they export it out, and that container never goes back to China. And so containers are considered a waste byproduct of the freight industry. A lot of people don't know that. They look at them as like big metal cardboard boxes that they just kind of discard once they're gone. And so even though they're built to protect freight, there really is no use for them after and beyond that in most people's minds. And so at the point I started exploring this in 2015 and planning, my entry into that full time, everybody again was saying like, "You're crazy, you're always going off on these cockamamie efforts." And I'm like, I'm telling you all, the new building problem is going to get more exacerbated if we don't start building again, because we stopped building when the market crashed in 2009. And again, people were like, "Oh no, we have an overabundance of houses. We don't need anybody building new houses." And then 2019 came when I launched the business, and people were like, again, we don't need houses. Then 2020 hit, and people were like, "Oh my God, you're a genius." And I'm like, y'all haven't been saying this the past 5-10 years. I've
That's because
basically been admonished.
you were early entrant. When you're early entrant, everybody thinks you're crazy. But
Absolutely.
you have been blessed to stay on task with the vision, which again, I know I was late to the party, but also early at the same time
Yes.
in watching you develop and evolve here. So I again salute you and am proud of you. What was happening, or how were they disposing of containers before you started turning them into housing, or how do they dispose of containers, or
They
do they just?
don't. There is no disposal process. They just kind of sit in freight yards, sit on docks, sit in the back of businesses, parking lots, and just kind of rust away unless they happen to be using it for interstate kind of freight shipment. But a lot of times they just sit there and rust and leak material, leak chemicals into the groundwater, into the earth, and so it's really not a plan, because, like I was saying, it's a waste byproduct, and China just makes new containers to ship more freight out. So there is no circular kind of recycling process where they go back to China for them to reuse. It's like once it leaves China, wherever it ends up, if they don't use it for anything, it'll just sit somewhere until it, rusts away.
And there is a universal size to all containers to meet shipping and transportation. Now, and I know before they didn't have a universal size, but they had to come to a universal for railway
Logistics and
and maritime transport and
yep,
all those sort of things, and to be able to take them from the ship to the train to the truck.
absolutely to wherever your location is.
So, what is that typical size of container?
The most typical size you'll see here in America, because every country has different ones. In America, they're 20 and 40 footers. But in like, the UK, for example, they have 10s, they have 30s, they have different sizes in different countries because there's different freight, that those countries are kind of like, are their staple kind of export products. And so they make the containers based off that freight. So for example, out of Asia, you'll see a lot of 45 footers because all the cars they send over, they have to send them in 45s. 40s aren't quite long enough, to ship more than one car in. So 45s let them get two cars, in the end. And they actually add another 2.5 linear feet on the ends of regular 40s. So it's a regular 40-foot container, but then they put a 2.5 foot, extra footer on each end and makes it 45s. And so just, it depends on the locale, but in America it's 40s and 20s.
And so basically a container is going to be 800 square feet.
No, so the 20 footers are, yes, we're so quick, 160 square feet. The 40 footers are 320 square feet, and the 45s, which is what we use, are 360 square feet. And combined, that's how we get to our 720 model that you are so familiar with.
So your typical container home has 720 square feet.
Yep, we have a 3-bed, 2-bath model that uses 245 footers for a total of 720 square feet.
How does that compare to a tiny home?
So tiny homes are really anything under about 400 square feet. Typically, it's more of a secondary home, or it's not. You can't really place those on a primary residence site unless you get a variance or unless that city has, some type of special kind of code in place that allows that to be, kind of standard practice. But typically a tiny home is much smaller. That's the 100, 200, 300 square foot homes. You have just enough room for a bed, maybe a little lounging area, but you can pretty much see every part of the house from one position.
Now, I know that you get a little bit of love in Dayton because there is no zoning restrictions for container homes. How does that look across the country and in other municipalities?
Well, actually, Dayton is really just now because of the affordable housing shortage, the inventory issue. Just like every municipality, they're now more open to it than they've ever been. But in the past, one of the biggest kind of responses that we got from folks are like, are you sure they're gonna let you do that here? Because I called down to the city back in 2011 and they told me, there was no way they'd ever let a container house be put up. Or I had a cousin that tried to buy some containers and put them on their land and they start getting fined because the city said no. And typically most people get denied when they're trying to do a project using containers because they show the containers with the metal exposed. And a lot of people don't know this, but 90% of all projects that get denied that involve containers are because they show the containers, where the metal is out there, and they see that it's like if you built a stick-built home, a wood home, it's like leaving the plyboard and the studs visible on the outside with no siding, no insulation, anything. They see that container exterior as an unfinished exterior. So if you don't plan on covering it, most cities are going to say no because they don't want the neighborhoods looking like freight yards.
So what's the largest square footage of a container home that you have or offer?
Right now we have models that are as large as 3,000 or 4,000 square feet. They can get pretty big. A lot of people only think about using the interior and part of the container as a living space versus using containers as outer foundation walls, putting a clear span roof up with metal trusses and allowing, you to use that center section as big as you want it to be, as long as you want it to be, as the actual living, playing working space. And so we can really get pretty sizable. There's really just sky's the limit. The only limit is imagination. But most folks, they got the champagne, dreams and the beer budget. So they're like, I want this container house that's all the way laid out. I saw one in Las Vegas, or I was out in Kathmandu and they had a container mansion. How much would that be? It's just $10,000 for containers, right? And I'm like, you do understand you still got to put all the same stuff in that container. You still got to put plumbing in there, electrical, finished stuff, appliances, drywall, insulation, all the things. So the containers don't actually affect the price really that much. It only accounts for about 4% of the material costs. The real boon in this is taking something like this and manufacturing, like we're manufacturing cars, to create a normalized process, to create, economy of scale where we can buy 200 units worth of material and store them and negotiate the pricing, for each piece of material in those bulk volume orders. And so that's what makes it magical. On top of the fact, containers are some of the strongest steel. They use a steel alloy that's some of the strongest in the world to protect freight. So it's actually over-engineered for living in, and it's waterproof, windproof, fireproof, and bulletproof. So, you can't say the same for most stick-built homes.
So one of the things you just talked about or you hit on was it can't look like a container. So what kind of exterior are you putting on the container homes to meet that requirement?
We can do the same thing as any stick-built home. So a lot of times people see like these new brick homes going up, and I let people know like that's not brick. Nobody's laying brick anymore, like real brick. Brick, mortar, like they aren't doing that. It's a piece of styrofoam that they engineer to look like brick, and then they stick it to the side of the wood house. So I'm like, we can do brick, we can do metal, we can do concrete. I mean, we can any type of medium vinyl. We're using a vinyl in our first model. But we have other options for folks, even like a multi kind of material facade where we can do brick and steel, where it has, a more modern contemporary look.
So can you do like the spray on drive it sort of deal where it also acts as gives it that stucco feel, but also that acts as insulation and improves the R value of the container?
Yep, absolutely. We have that as an option, and we're still in that kind of get the models out the door and then get into the innovation, get into the play, do different building materials, external facades. We're just now getting that first model off the assembly line. So we're actually in the process of waiting for our permit answer to come back from the state. And that's one of the ways that we worked around it. As you know, we've been at this since 2019, and we're just now about to build our first model. People are like, oh man, it's a container house. How hard could it be? And our thing wasn't just to build a container house that would be basically a 20,000 pound paperweight that we couldn't get permitted in place anywhere. It was like, let's go through the proper permitting process at the state level. So when we get this first unit built, we can go and do 1 million of that model and never have to go back to the state for permitting. Now, municipalities, they'll have to do the site related stuff and review that state permit. But the state permitting lets us then take it to other states and get reciprocity and, expand much more efficiently than going city by city.
Can you walk us through the process of building out a container home? And do you build them at your facility and then you ship them and assemble them, or do you assemble them on site?
Correct. So we actually do the fabrication, as it were, at our facility. And then, yes, it's an assembly or more of an installation at the site. There would be some finished work that had to be done to make sure certain things aren't damaged in transport. But the lion's share, 85-90%, is completed at our facility, so that we can move in a way that allows us to save, and then we can pass those savings on to the end user.
So what is the typical price point for container homes, and how does it compare to stick-built homes? And I guess, have you had any issues of valuation with container homes? I know Fannie and Freddie accepts them now, and you can utilize them, but then getting around the valuation and comparable sales and utilizing costs, implementation, and those sort of issues. Can you speak to me about some of those things that you've seen, and how do you plan on dealing with them?
For sure. So a lot of people at the the non-professional side of things, just owner occupants having those conversations. When we first presented our design in 2019, 720 square feet for $150,000, people were like, there's no way anybody's going to pay you $150,000 for 720 square feet. Never. Plus, there's no way a container house costs that much to build. These are people who don't who've never done construction in their lives. Like, she's like, there's no way it costs that much to build a container house. There's no way anybody's going to buy it. Fast forward to today, people are like, man, $150,000 for 720, man, that's a deal. Like, that's a damn good deal. They love the price point now, but 6 years ago, 7 years ago, it was like, there's no way. And so, our price point is competitive to stick built. But where we say we, are really superior is in the fact that it's steel. So if we had the same cost as a stick built home, it's still a better value for a container house because a stick built house can't be said to be waterproof, windproof, fireproof, and bulletproof. So you automatically lose. It's an apples versus watermelon comparison because the containers are 4-inch thick Corten steel, and they are relocatable. If you decide to expand up on it and, make the home bigger later on, unlike a stick built home where it'll never line up right. I don't know if you've been in any houses where they added on to the house later and the floors are never right. It sags. It doesn't settle the same. With containers, since it's steel, if and when you decide to expand, you have that option and you don't have to worry about those issues. And so it has a lot of characteristics that make it superior to stick built with a price point that is competitive. And with the economy of scale effect, we're able to get the pricing down over time and then again pass those savings on because we're doing it in a factory versus, this scattered site type of approach.
So at that price point, $150,000 for 700 square feet, that's roughly $200 a square feet. Now, is that including the land or is that just the house?
That's just the unit itself. We can definitely support in the land acquisition of sites, seeking the site, acquiring the site, doing the testing. We have a development, coaching, and consulting arm to support folks. Because a lot of people, are intimidated by the thought of building a home, let alone using a shipping container. And everybody's heard so many horror stories about using containers to build or trying to, that a lot of it is overcoming the stigma, not just at the, individual personal level, but even for like government officials. A lot of them don't understand. Like, we've had to do a lot of re-educating the local government officials and have them understand, like, you don't have the jurisdiction here because we're an offsite fabricator. It sits with the state. You have 10%, which is the site related things. The state has 90%, which is related to the actual structure. So just in them understanding that has been a beast in and of itself.
So how does a container home compare to, say, a mobile home or a trailer, something in the trailer park?
So the mobile homes, trailer homes are really stick-built homes that are smaller. They're about the same size as a container, but it's wood. So you can almost put your foot through the side of it. It doesn't take much for it to, be damaged. You definitely don't want to be in one during like a powerful storm of any sort. And that's where the real difference lies is that, mobile homes, they're better now. They have a different standard because back in the day, mobile homes were very much so like super entry level. And so they didn't put a lot of quality into building them. And there wasn't a lot of effort in the maintenance of them thereafter. So the stigma around mobile homes makes it such that people hear we're doing container homes or modular. They're like, oh, so you're doing trailer parks. And it's like, no, a mobile home is not the same as a container house. And that's another re-education piece because people think all this stuff is synonymous. I'm like, it's a reason they have different words for different things. Like,
So what needs to exist before you put down a home? Like if you're in a mobile park home, you have a pad.
Yep.
So do you need to have water, sewer to connect to, or do you have a water well, or do you have to have a cistern? Or what type of system do you need for disposal and to be set up in?
Well, there's not any particular where it's a need-based thing. The need really lies with that end user. So if there's somebody who wants to be off-grid, they're going to put it in more of a rural area that may not have, access to sewage. There's systems that they have now. Like, I don't know if you've seen the ones that basically burn up the waste in the toilets, for example. So you don't have
I
to
haven't
have.
seen that.
Yeah, they got them where you can basically be off grid and you can just burn up the waste and it turns it into ashes and you can just dump the ashes out. And it's like,
I know folks
completely.
be letting out a lot of lethal gas into the toilet. So is that able to be recycled and used for some sort of energy purposes?
Those ashes, I'm sure they have some type of like, benefits to them where you could use them for composting or something like that. But the beauty of it is like, that's one of the biggest things with rural living is where do we have sewage? Do we have running water? So if you're somewhere where it's on a well, cistern, etc., we can work with all those scenarios. It's really just what are your needs versus, what do we offer? We can get pretty creative because there's solutions out there all day now, compared to 10, 20 years ago to make all these things feasible.
And one of the things that I guess the last time you and I connected, we were talking about a farm project you were working on in North Carolina
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
farmer, and we since then have a container farm at our at the entrepreneurial at the high school that we're working at, Best Academy, where they have a 500 square foot container farm, and they'll
Yeah.
be able to produce 150 pounds of leafy green vegetables a week. And the school is in the middle of a food desert. So, what other uses are you working on with your fabrication of the container outside of housing?
Yeah, so the housing is definitely our low hanging fruit. It's easy to get into it from that end. But really, my mission is to build out the corridors in some of these, most kind of fallen by the wayside cities. A lot of these cities, haven't really figured out how to deal with the fact that their corridors have been taken over by big box operations that don't have any vested interest in the community's, well-being. And so I really have a mission to help as many business owners, mom and pop type of shops open up in their neighborhoods, because that's where real economic power comes from. When you can establish, an operation where you live at, you don't have to drive 30 minutes, an hour to get to, your shop. When you can hire people who live in the community and they don't have to drive 30 minutes or an hour, and then every dollar that you earn, you're more inclined to spend where you live at if there's other retailers in the area that are offering the things that you need to live your life. And so I have a real big mission around like that commercial corridor build out, people setting up anchor institutions in their communities and becoming pillars to start to change, kind of their outlook. Because right now, we're talking about housing, and I explain to people, you could have a Jetsons house that folds in a suitcase. It doesn't matter if you don't have the economic mobility to allow you to thrive and, strive for your goals and your dreams. And that comes from there being kind of this like walkable kind of city type of scenario where if you live in an urban setting, you need to be able to walk within 15 minutes and get 80% of everything that you need. That's the ideal scenario. And most cities cannot claim that they have that as an option. But a lot of cities, everybody's trying to get to that in this new urbanism thing. Like how do we make cities basically walkable neighborhoods where you can get everything in the neighborhood? You don't have to go to the Walmart 20 minutes away. You can get almost everything you need within walking distance of your front door.
But I think one of the strategies that I see for you is working in those rural tertiary communities and building a community from the outside in, and making everything there inside of the container. And I see them in some there's a project here actually in the West End and in different places where they use the containers as retail shops. They're small footprints, and people are able to put their retail operations and build out the interior. So I think that's a very workable, sustainable, and buildable model that you and I had talked about a couple of years ago. And so for it to be coming into fruition from an economic development standpoint, I applaud you for A, having a big vision first and foremost, but then B, having the fortitude to fight through all the difficulties and trials and tribulations that I won't even start to name. So I know there's been a multitude. We check in from time to time just to check the pulse, see where each other are and how we're coming on our respective missions. I'm glad we're able to connect here and bring some awareness to your work and what you're doing. And I think it's going to be an awesome opportunity for Dayton and the community, and for you to be your launch pad to go across the country.
Yes, because our goal is ultimately to be able to set up satellite fabrication hubs to where we could go to Cincinnati, and instead of us trying to ship units and making Dayton's headquarters the bottleneck, we set up a factory. Actually, I talked to Miss Barb about that. Like, hey, you're a steel person. I want to eventually expand to Cincy. She's like, oh, say the word. We can figure something out. I got metal workers for days. And so my mission is set up micro factories in other locations and then help empower some constituents there to basically lead that charge where they're the ones that define and design their community and build it out from the inside out.
I think that's a hell of a footprint, but also what I just had a brain fart. What I was thinking about is in your building in the workforce development space, how long does it take to build out a container and what type of skill set do you need? Or does it work more like an assembly line, everybody working on one part, or do you need particular skilled labor?
It's more of an assembly line, but less. It's a hybrid of both because you're doing it's more advanced manufacturing than just like pulling a lever. You have to have people there that still know have the construction skills, are certified, etc.
So you need plumbers, electricians,
Yep,
HVAC.
Yep, carpenters.
As a matter of fact, what kind of HVAC systems are you running? Split systems, mini
heat pumps. More now, heat pumps than anything. Heat pumps are now taking over from an efficiency standpoint. But yeah, we're always looking at the bleeding edge of the different technologies for that side of things. So it's like, is there something that's coming out that's newer than mini splits? And we ran into heat pumps. It's like this is what we're switching to. Anytime we see an opportunity to switch to something better, after we research it and clear it, it's like let's move and use that now because that's a much better approach in this particular instance.
How do people get it? Can you tell our listeners the name of your company and how people can get in touch with you and how they can find you?
For sure. So the name of the company is Modular Fabrication Incorporated, or Mod-Fab Inc. for short. Our website is mod-fab.com. I can be reached at Kemo at mod-fab.com. And I was going to also say that something that people don't realize with the workforce piece is it's not just limited to the jobs within the actual fabrication facility. You have the logistics to deliver it, the installation to actually put it on the site, and then the site development related work that has to get the site ready in order to receive the unit or units. And so there's 4 groupings of job profiles, and I actually did a write-up, and based off our target production goals, the first year all the way up to year 5, our projections. By year 5, when we reach that goal, we will be paying out over $500 million of salaries and contracting fees, not just for the jobs, not only for the jobs in the factory, but all those other jobs that happen after that unit leaves the site, leaves the facility and heads to the site. And so there's a massive workforce play here because, and that's just with us at one location, doing 1,000 units a year by year 5 at one location is $500 million that we will have paid out over that 5 years for our one location here in Dayton. So when you start adding in other micro factories we set up, it just becomes something that snowballs really quickly.
Yeah, I like what you're doing. Again, any way that I can support you, I am there. And when we get back to Dayton, we actually are in the area doing some work with Central State as a part of our training and stuff that we're doing. So I definitely want to get you out. I want to definitely get you back on the show and get some more of this knowledge and wisdom of your projects and how they are moving. Again, I'm so proud of you and your tenacity and vision to keep this thing moving. And I look forward to tracking your success. So with that, thank you for coming on Thaddaus Dawson Speaks. And to our listeners, please like, share, and subscribe. Do you have anything you want to close out with? And that's Kemo. I didn't call you Chemo because every time we talk, you had to remind me that you're not a cancer treatment. So I practiced that for the show just for you.
I appreciate that, my brother. And yeah, we got some other great things coming down the pike with this. We're going to have a peer-to-peer mortgage arrangement where we're going to make it to where the community can get involved and provide the financing, be the lenders to the public, to each other, to where we don't have to go to the banks. We can keep those opportunities within the community and allow folks to, be passive supporters of this affordable housing effort, considering how much money is moving around. So we have some real layers here where our goal is to create a circular economy with this approach, not just build a container house here and there.
And I think in the circular economy, that's what the crypto and blockchain lends itself to,
Yep.
being able to cooperatively invest with decentralized money. And with that, you have some independence, and people get the opportunity to invest and fractionally, and then you're able to keep a digital record and a digital footprint of the interest. So it's always transparent and always in real time. So those smart contracts are the future. As a matter of fact, I believe BlackRock just did its first crypto transfers with fractional interest, and they're looking at tokenizing the whole real estate industry across the world. So that's going to be one of our upcoming episodes, where I've done a lot of work with Professor Oscar Sistrunk from Morehouse, where we talked about fractional interest. He has a proof of concept that he utilized in St. Louis, buying a house with cryptocurrency and selling fractional interest. So that I might need to get the two of you all together so we can look at how to finance your projects moving forward. And that's what it's all about the liberation part and bringing each other together.
Especially now more than ever, man.
Absolutely. So again, thank you for coming on to the show. I look forward to your success and continue collaboration, and continue to reach out and check on me, man. I need that, and I always enjoy our conversations.
Likewise, I'll be down in Atlanta once this weather breaks, man. So we'll definitely make sure we sit down, formally get together again.
Yeah, you got to wait till it breaks, because coming down this time, it ain't too much relief. We running about the same. We 20 degrees, but y'all got that plus the snow. So
exactly. Quit acting like you're not from here.
Yeah, well, it's a good place to be from.
Not to still be at.
I won't deny that that's where I'm from. And actually, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Our producer, Rick Clear, is 30 minutes to the west from you in Dayton, across 70, right there at the Indiana Dayton border. So
absolutely, it's a Midwest family affair today.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Don't get left behind.